Hi, everyone. My name is Robyn Smith, and I'm very pleased to be here today. This is my second time at the conference. And what I want to say before I get started is what I say here today are my own ideas and thoughts based on my own experiences, and they are not thoughts of the Attorney General. He may agree or disagree, I'm not sure. Today I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about the what is often referred to as the poverty industry or fringe lending. I'm also going to briefly discuss the potential that faith-based lending has to replace this kind of harmful lending. Basically, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the predatory lending industry, and I'm going to focus on two types of products that are not the home predatory lending products. There are other kinds of products offered. The fringe lending industry preys on the desperate circumstances on the poor and on their wish to attain the increasingly unavailable American dream. And the distinguishing characteristic of these lenders are extremely high interest rates. For example, a 460% annual percentage rate for a 2-week payday loan, a 26% APR for a home mortgage, 150 to 1,800% APR for a tax refund anticipation loan, or, for example, paying $2,200 over the course of 2 years for a $500 television at a rent-a-center. These are astronomical rates, I'm sure you all know. And unfortunately, they're paid by the poorest people in our society. In the Gospels, the people to flock to Jesus are often referred to as the multitudes. And these are the people today that I'm talking about. They are the ones that are struggling to achieve success as it's defined by the economic empire we live in, and it's very difficult for them to do so. They have tight budgets, and they face increasing costs of subsistence in housing, in medical care, child care, transportation, education, and food. Fannie Mae conducted a study and concluded that these alternative financial services are disproportionately located in minority and poor neighborhoods. And these people are in a debt crisis, and there's an increasing growing number of them. We have personal bankruptcies in California and in the nation at an all-time high. The highest per capita bankruptcy rate is right here in Los Angeles. Record debt loads in the United States and the lowest savings rate ever. And debt really harms people, not only economically, but physically, and it really takes an emotional burden on families from shame and stress. And I've just seen, it break apart families, and it's a terrible, terrible cost to the communities that siphon these profits out of these communities. Where do the profits from fringing lending go? They don't go to the communities. They basically go to the shareholders in very large corporations that engage in these lending practices. The first type of practice I'm going to talk about are tax refund anticipation loans, since it's just the end of tax season now. In 2002, because those are the most recent statistics I have are for the 2002 tax season, there were 12.7 million tax anticipation refund loans. So this constitutes just under 10% of the U.S. population getting these expensive loans. These consumers paid $1.14 billion in tax fees, in anticipation loan refund fees, $406 million in administrative fees. And based on this, the annual percentage rates range from 70% to 700% APR. And this is just to get a loan in 2 days instead of 2 weeks that they're paying these rates. Oftentimes, they've done surveys of these borrowers. They don't understand that they're getting a loan. They actually think they're getting their tax refund and that they have to pay these fees to get it. What's worst about it is that 55% of these borrowers are earned income tax credit recipients, and they only comprise 15% of U.S. taxpayers. This is the largest federal anti-poverty program in the United States, and it brings approximately 4.7 million people out of poverty every year, the majority of whom are children. But when you have this kind of lending going on, it's draining an estimated $525 million from the EITC funds to pay for these refund anticipation loans. That's your money and my money, our taxpayer money, that should be going to the poor, but are instead going to the coffers of these lenders. Plus $1.06 billion paid for the tax preparation fees, $161 million in check cashing fees, for a total of $1.75 billion spent by the working poor to get RALs. Now, the tax refund anticipation loans are expanding. They're not just at the H&R Block offices anymore. You can get them at a car dealership to put as a down payment on your car. You can get them at pawn shops. You can get them now at payday lending stores. You can get them at Sears, Kmart, Walmart, and even Rent-A-Center now has these loans in conjunction with Jackson Hewitt. So they're making it very easy and visible for these people to get loans. And what's also really sad is, although the EITC forms are very difficult to fill out, they are voluminous and difficult, there are in Los Angeles, there's what's called a volunteer income tax assistant program, and there's tons of accountants and people that will help these recipients to fill out their own taxes. They will help them to get their own bank account for free in conjunction with several banks in the Los Angeles area. They will help them to get an email account for free, also that they can receive electronically their payments and get into the banking system. These are people that are not in our banking system. 40% of them do not have bank accounts and will rely on the check cashers. I'm really briefly going to also talk about payday loans. There are over 2,000 payday storefronts in California and over 1 million transactions per month. 91% of all payday loans are made to borrowers worth 5 or more times per year, and over 33% receive 11 loans per year. And so what happens to these people is they get what's called a debt treadmill. They pay one loan, they get one loan, but in 2 weeks, are they going to have more money? No. So then they find out that, well, they have to pay off the loan, but immediately they have to get another loan to survive. And they get on this treadmill of never-ending debt where they just can't get out of the debt. And it really is, I've seen victims of this who are Social Security recipients, who are disabled people, who are people, as long as they're getting a check every month or every 2 weeks, they can get a payday loan. Last year, in 2003, the payday loan industry lent approximately $25 billion, and borrowers paid about $3.4 billion in fees. The average annual income is around $23,000 a year of these borrowers, and the APRs range from 391% upwards of 800%, depending on what state you're in. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are unfortunately a lot of lending products within these low-income communities because that's where they really focus. So it's terrible. Now, who are these fringe lenders? A lot of them are publicly traded corporations, but unfortunately, they team up with banks to make their products available. For example, Household International partners with H&R Block, and it has over 50% of the market share. Jackson Hewitt partners with Santa Barbara Bank and Trust. It has 10% of the share of the RAL market, and Bank One Corp gets 10% of the RAL market, and they make an astronomical return on these products. Payday loans as well. A lot of the payday lenders it's called rent-a-charter, and they find a state-chartered bank that is chartered in an unregulated state so that they can avoid the usury laws in the state where they are lending. So that they can, in California, for example, Ace Check Cashing was hooking up with Goleta National Bank so that it could avoid California's usury rates. And there's really, right now, a focus on that because it really is an abusive use of a bank charter. They get a 34% return on their investment. They often say, well, they have to lend at these high rates because they're taking a huge risk. But the reality is the numbers don't show that risk. In North Carolina, for example, only 6% of the payday loan checks were returned for insufficient funds, and eventually 69% of those get paid. So there really isn't here the risk that justifies that kind of interest. That's the same with the IRS. You know you're going to get paid by the IRS. There isn't a lot of risk there, especially if you are preparing the tax returns yourself. You should have some hope. I would hope that you would have some hope that your own work is good enough and that you're doing it right. So these kinds of huge returns are just not justified. Now, unfortunately, our society really prizes this kind of lending. These are wonder kids on the stock markets. They exalt these profit-making enterprises. And this is where I think faith-based lending can really make a difference. Unfortunately, we live in a materialistic culture. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. We're constantly bombarded with messages that we are what we own. And that this message of instant gratification, if you want it, you deserve it now. And this just results in huge debt loads that Americans are accumulating. Unfortunately, greed and profit are paramount in our society, and they're often valued over community and humanity. We have an economic system in which financial service providers that harm entire communities are prized as long as they bring in shareholder profits. In addition, the means of exchange have become increasingly abstract. Money is no longer a means of exchange, but it's sought for in and of itself. And this money fetishism, what happens is that this abstract way of dealing with money leads us to think of things and people more abstractly, so that we become detached to things like starvation and suffering in different communities. And we become alienated from our own experiences. And I'm relying on the work of Ched Myers when I'm talking about this. I'm no theologian or economist. And he says that the economic empire that we live in is an empire of addiction to material wealth. Like Midas, we are trying to turn the whole world into a gold that we can control, and the people are spiritually and physically dying from it. We also have a system that purposely maintains the unequal bargaining positions of consumers and a lack of financial literacy, which is a huge problem. And we have barriers in low-income communities and poor communities to accessing traditional banking services. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the solution in the context of Christianity. And again, I'm no theologian, so I'll do my best. Jesus lived in a time of economic empire, the Roman Empire. And like our economic empire today, it was based on an oppressive economic system which prized the hoarding of God's gifts and the earth's abundance in the hands of a few, causing great misery and destitution for the poor. Based on his Jewish heritage, Jesus preached liberation from this economic addictive system. And he advocated for a radically separate, alternative economic system, which he called the kingdom of God. Now, you aren't going to hear this preached in a lot of mainline Christian churches. But if you read the Gospels, the most talked about concept in the Gospels is money. And it's astonishing that so many mainline Christian churches sort of have pushed that to the side and fail really to engage with that and ask themselves what it means. In this system, the earth and its resources are recognized as gifts from God that should be available to the entire community. We humans are stewards of this great and abundant wealth, responsible for using it to maintain the health of the communities and responsible for making sure that all people partake of that abundance. And disparities in wealth are seen actually as sin. Inequality is sin. And debt was seen as a yoke of burden. Thus, there was a mandate every 7 years to release the debts of everyone. So the idea is not to hoard wealth, but to release it back into the community, to take just what you need, allowing the wealth to circulate so that all people have enough to live in dignity. Moderation and a balanced pattern of consumption. Otherwise, like water, wealth will stagnate and poison us. Thus, unlike the empire's economic system, a Christian economic system does not value the accumulation of wealth at the expense of the poor and of the earth. So what would a financial institution modeled on alternative economic system look like? Well, human dignity would be of primary importance, not profits. Sabbath economics is based on the conviction that human beings are not simply workers or accumulators of wealth. We were made in the image of God. The day of Sabbath is a day to remember who and what we are, that we are here to serve God's purposes, that we are God's hands and voice. We are not the servants of money and greed. As such, we are the subjects of change. We are the only ones that can start to change the harmful ways of lending and start offering credit with a conscience. An early faith-based financial institution was started by the sister of Basil the Great. In the 4th century, a community of women put together their dowries to give help for the poor. So financial institutions must have deep roots in the communities they serve, use the community's savings deposited at the institution to create businesses, housing, and needed services within that community. No charging of interest, no accumulation of wealth at the expense of the poor, but a valuing of an investment in humans and their families. Information should be made available to all parties, but we must make sure that they all understand it. It is incumbent on us to raise the level of financial literacy, and if an institution is engaging in a transaction with a consumer, to make sure that they understand all the terms of that contract. Today, many Christians are attempting to form alternative financial institutions, like the Episcopal Credit Union in Los Angeles. But it's not easy, as I'm sure many of you know. And this is where all our partnership comes in. We really have to support each other in creating alternative economic institutions, because we live in a society where they just aren't valued as they should be. Doing this together is really important. We are challenging the prevalent economic model of empire. In addition, our society's wealth addiction is far bigger than we are. We cannot manage it alone. We must work together in a process of recovery from this addiction. And I really think Lariba's doing an amazing job of doing this. It is a model for all of us to look to this model and try to create it within our own communities, but also to support each other. Thanks.